I'm Laura Andrews. I am coordinating gallery, the James Wagner Gallery at Riverland Community College in Austin, Minnesota. And I'm joined tonight by the lovely Erika Ritzel, who is a wonderful photographer and a personal friend. I've liked her work since I saw it before we were friends. So I think a true testament to loving somebody's work. And I'm just going to play a little bit of video while I talk about her bio. Can we see it okay?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Erika Ritzel grew up in Carbondale, Illinois, and now lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She received her BFA from Webster University in St. Louis and her MFA from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. A majority of her photographic work deals with space, family, memory, nostalgia, and loss. She received a grant in 2002 from the Illinois Humanities Council to complete a project on the flood of 1993, which destroyed her father's hometown. She also received a Minnesota State Arts Board Initiative grant in 2008, 2013, and 2018. She's been selected for the second round of the McKnight Fellowship of Photographers 2 different times. Her work has also been exhibited in a variety of places, including Palm Springs Art Museum in California, the Minnesota Museum of American Art in St. Paul, the Minnesota Center for Photography, Coalition of Photographic Arts in Wisconsin, the Phoenix Art Museum in Arizona, the Medium Festival of Photography in California, the Carlisle Photo Festival in England, and the Guada Photo Festival in Guatemala City, Guatemala. She's currently teaching photography at Inver Hills Community College, which is in the Twin Cities area. And her statement from her website on this series of photos, I'm going to read through that. The series, It's Hard to Find Home Again, was created while thinking about the connection between my parents, my hometown, our evolving relationships over the years, and the difficulty of being geographically separated. The images show activities and events that have occurred throughout our lives together: shoveling the driveway, eating breakfast, chores in the backyard, as well as metaphors of time and change found in the environment around us. The majority of the images were taken around my hometown in Illinois or in the Twin Cities area. And the show is up through the 31st, and it's open 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. during the week. I've also put a link in the chat to Erika's website for anybody who is interested in that. Hey. And you can see a lot more images because she's done other series of photos, and they're organized in the website. So that kind of gives us a little bit of your bio. And for anybody that's just joined, I just went through Erika's bio and some information about the show, which is also available on the website. I'm gonna, I think, move over into showing some individual pieces. If Erika, you wouldn't mind talking about your work.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, the work that's in the show right now is primarily from a series called It's Hard to Find Home Again. And mixed in with some other work that maybe didn't make it in that project, but then also didn't fit in previous projects that I had either. So yeah, if you want to go to the first few, I can kind of start talking about it. But yeah, as Laura was saying in my statement for this project, a lot of these images were made missing family. Whether, I'm not from Minnesota, I'm from Southern Illinois. And so when I moved here, 18 years ago, it was kind of hard for me to figure out where I fit. And so a lot of this work actually made when I went back home to visit. Also, thinking about a lot of it's about loss, but trying to capture kind of these still lifes of this place that I really remember. This is of my grandmother's home before we did an estate sale of her house. And, just trying to capture these little moments that I grew up with, that I remember before they're gone or before they disappear. And so this one is from the It's Hard to Find Home project. This is my dad out shoveling snow, which we get a lot less snow down there. There's actually flowers blooming there now, which I'm very jealous about. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing, I really, I miss being there. I miss the places we go and the family that I would visit there. I also did a project up here about estate sales, where I went into homes as they were being set up for an estate sale. This is from one of them. And just, again, kind of looking for these still lifes that were set up, because a lot of times it felt like it was a store, but inside someone's home, but also looking for details of the people that lived in that space and occupied that space. So I feel like this theme overall has been going on since I was a teenager when I started making images. Laura mentioned, I think, in my bio about the flood of 1993, which feels forever ago at this point. But my grandmother's hometown and my dad's hometown were destroyed in a flood of the Mississippi River. Took out the whole town. Her house was under, 15 feet of water for weeks. And so afterwards I went in and kind of investigated that as well. So I feel like this theme of looking at spaces, trying to capture these little details, these moments before they disappear is a huge theme in my work overall. This one is from a friend's grandmother's studio out in Denver. It looks a little cobwebby, but it is an indoor porch space, but her grandmother had passed away. And so, it was left kind of as it was. And we got into the house when her grandfather was in a nursing home. And so it was emptied for a long time. And we were kind of going through it to, again, get it ready for an estate sale. There's a few pictures here from that Denver home as well, I think. If you want to go to the next one, I don't know which order I put these in. This is another one from an estate sale, but again, looking at this idea of home and these kind of objects being here very temporary. Usually don't set a lamp or a hat on a lamp and shoes on a TV. So again, I was very interested in how these scenes were set up as kind of this storefront for people to, again, walk into somebody's home that they didn't know, go through all their stuff that they'd never seen before, try to pick out these little elements or, objects that they found interesting themselves. I was doing that too, but not, so much purchasing the objects, but trying to get that little touch of home. This one is from the Denver home as well. This old lamp from the 60s and 70s. We were, moving things around. And so this just kind of found its place on this cart in the middle of the driveway. I don't remember how that happened, but, I'm trying not to set anything up in any of these images. So yeah, I try to capture things as I find them. This one too, I guess, is from outside my old apartment, but I just really was drawn to the shape, the texture. I'm looking for patterns a lot too, and just trying to find interesting compositions in the objects that I see as well. But yeah, just this again showing kind of this history of time in one image, I thought was really interesting, because I was wondering how long has that been dripping, right? It's like most giant massive ice. This one too was from not necessarily an estate sale, but from a friend's home after they had moved out. So again, just kind of going through, actually, what's this? This might have been getting ready to get rid of the stuff in the house. I think they had passed away at this point. But yeah, this old Apple computer, that was still functional, that he still used from the 80s or whatever. I just thought was a really great little still life. This little guy too, just, again, trying to find objects with personality to kind of show an element of the people that maybe used the space or had lived in the space. These clothespins, again, I didn't set this up. I found them. This was in the basement of my parents' church, actually. Those really old partitions that you drag across to separate the room. Someone had just stuck these little clothespins in one of those. And, again, I'm not using any artificial lighting. I'm trying to just capture the natural light the best I can. So I focus, I try to get things near windows, or with a lot of sunlight coming in, so I can feel the warmth too of the space. Yeah, this one is in my folks' backyard. This little cherry tree that they had set up. I wish I had taken pictures of the giant cherry trees they used to have in their yard that they would cover with giant nets to keep the birds out. But I don't think I was really photographing then, because that probably was before I was 10 years old. But they have new cherry trees there now, that I just wanted to kind of capture with the idea of the older ones in mind, which, I know, but people looking at this image don't. But again, just a sense of home, the sense of place. I love the lush greens of that one too. Anyway, sorry, you can go the grapefruit. This one too, I didn't set it up. I think this is how my mom had set up the breakfast or whatever. Just setting up this grapefruit in this bowl, again, that we've used as long as I can remember, these older embroidered tablecloths. But again, just finding these still lifes with this natural light just sweeping in, showing again these little details. This one I love. This was one of the first images I think I made in grad school that I just really fell in love with. And this was taken of my grandparents' home. Again, they had both died. It was an empty house. We were going through it to try to get rid of stuff. And this couch I just loved, but it was huge and it was uncomfortable. And so I was just trying to document it the best I could so I could at least have the memory of it. But just really interested in the worn spot in the middle, of how many times it had been sat on, and that it actually broke all the threads there in the center. Yeah, but the pattern, I've always been drawn to patterns. My grandmother, made quilts. My mother sews, and so I think I've always been drawn to that kind of tactile quality with objects as well. This one is in my parents' garden, and my mom there kind of going through, I think picking bugs off the broccoli, I think. But again, like when I go home, I just kind of spend a few days following them around with cameras, like especially when they're outdoors. And just trying to capture them in their elements, right? And like, again, these things that I really miss about living up here and not being around them as much. Yeah, this was another estate sale, and just kind of going through and opening drawers, looking at things, seeing if there was like stuff in the objects that maybe I had missed. But I was just, again, really pulled to this pattern of the contact paper. And so I left the drawer open and made an image of that. And also just kind of the, paint coming off the dresser. That one looks a little broken in the middle, like the wood piece in the center there. Yeah, just kind of, again, trying to give it that human element without actually including human, people in a lot of these pictures. This is another one from the Denver house. And I loved this one because the grandfather had smoked for decades inside the house. And so all the walls were just coated with soot, basically. And so when we removed this one clock, you could really see how stained everything was. See the original paint color as opposed to what it was now. And I believe there was also maybe a little fire in the kitchen at some point. So there was some smoke damage from that too. But again, just showing how lived in these spaces are and showing kind of the people that live there and the personalities of the folks that live there too.
that's the last image in the group. I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about maybe how your process has changed over the years, maybe when you started kind of this, I mean, I know they're separate bodies of work, but maybe when you started kind of on that journey, and then what kind of equipment you use now, like what's your process like now?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So when I started out, uh, gosh, early in high school, I started making images, and I started with a 35 millimeter film camera, taking primarily black and white because that's what we were learning on. And so I did black and white for a very, very long time. And that's what all the flood images were that I'm realizing we're talking about, but I don't think they're even on my website at this point. Um, which reminds me, I need to add them. And so then from that, I went to college and started making color images with color film because we had a color processor there that we could do all that on. Oh, it's my folks. Hi. But yeah, so I started doing that and started using bigger cameras, Hasselblads and other twin lens reflex cameras, which are medium format cameras. And just again started just kind of photographing what was around me, family, home, and whatnot. And then when I moved up here, I maybe still was using medium format cameras so I could make larger images. And up here, I definitely started printing larger images. So the images that are in the show are the biggest ones that I've made. They're, I think the image itself is 26 by 26 inches and they're framed 30 by 30. So for me, they feel very big compared to what I did before and what I'm working on now. And then, yeah, so I kind of dug into the estate sale project here, trying to find a subject matter that was really interesting to me, being far away from my hometown. And then after that, I started kind of photographing the hometown more, and kind of during the estate sale project as well, I guess.
Are most of these images, so like this image, is this shot with a film camera and digitally printed, just so that those of us who are not photographers
Oh, for
have
sure.
just
Yeah.
like a clue of how you made it?
Yeah, all of these were taken with film and then scanned, and then lots of spotting because of the dust on the film, and and then printed digitally. So yeah, a lot of steps with each of these, but digital, I was really nervous when digital kind of started becoming popular because I was so used to the analog method of printing, but there's just so much more you can do with digital, tweaking certain parts of the image, changing colors of certain parts, adding saturation, all that stuff. So
And then
yeah.
do you ever shoot digitally now? I know not in this group of work, but do you ever shoot now
I
digitally?
do shoot digitally. I feel like I did a project for Hutchinson, the town of Hutchinson out in McLeod County, where I photographed digitally because I was kind of recreating old historical photographs in the place they currently exist. And so for that purpose, it was a necessity to use digital. And now I'm honestly using my iPhone for a lot of stuff just because it's easier to use. I can see the images right away. I can compose them better. I've been trying to do, I don't know, it's just been hard, I guess. Especially now that like a lot of places aren't processing film anymore, and you kind of need your own gear to print digitally a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I haven't used film, unfortunately, for a while. I have a drawer full of it, full of film in my fridge, which is probably all expired, but hopefully it'll
Does it
survive.
go bad?
Well, it has an expiration date, so it kind of gets wonky, but I think as long as you keep it in the fridge, that helps protect the emulsion and
Okay.
stuff. Um,
Cool.
but yeah.
Well, I'm gonna move over to just asking some student questions.
Oh, sure.
So I'm gonna try to pull up the image the question's about, and then after that, we'll maybe move over. Dom Vanzant teaches at Riverland, and he captured some student reactions and some student questions. in Flipgrid. So we'll pull up a couple of those so that the student question can kind of come right from them. So the ones that I have, one of them is about, and you kind of answered it, but one of them is about this image, the little clothespins. And they were really curious about if you found them that way, and then for you, kind of what the meaning is. Because their feeling was like it's almost like in childhood that you like leave these little things behind, but they were curious what meaning there is for you.
Yeah, I definitely see that in here. Because, you know, it's just this little humor, which I wasn't expecting, I guess, when I was looking around there trying to photograph. So yeah, I mean, you know, it is, like you said, how kids, you know, and I know our daughter sets up little still lifes all the time, just of little nonsense all over the house. And so I feel like this is definitely, it goes that direction. Um, yeah, and I don't know who set it up. I don't know if it was a kid or an adult. It was very high up on the wall, so I'm guessing it maybe would have been an adult or you know, teenager on a stool.
Just has a kind of carefree quality.
Yeah, and I just really love the color palette too with that one, the brown on brown. It's kind of nice.
We had another question about this piece. They were curious where it was, and I think just from what you said, it might have been in an estate sale, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about where that location is, and then like how you got into shooting at estate sales.
Yeah, this is actually an auction. So I started going to auctions and estate sales, and I think there's some auctions in the book, but I feel like the estate sale interior pictures just kind of flowed better together. But this is an outdoor estate sale or auction, I mean, sorry. So they just have everything on these flatbed trailers, basically. So you can go through beforehand and look at everything, and then you just kind of hang around, an auctioneer then like hold stuff up and you bid on it. Right. So the atmosphere there is very different. It's very much constantly full of people all the time. Where I guess estate sales, when I go, there wasn't people there, but then during the sale itself, there's a lot of people there. So I was just, I mean, I was just drawn to this like collection of bats and like all the details and the markings and like the tape coming off and then being reapplied. So just all these little tiny details on it. And then what was your second question about? Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. And then they were just curious about the location. And then also I wanted to add to that how you got into shooting at auctions and estate sales.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think I started photographing auctions and estate sales kind of with a purpose near the end of grad school, because I think a fellow classmate kind of gave me the idea, and they're like, well, you go to these anyway, why don't you just start photographing them? Because my dad had always gone to auctions as far as I can remember. And so then, you know, less auctions happen up here in the city. There's more estate sales in the city. So I just started going to those, and I kind of connected with some women that ran one and their company. And so then they would invite me while they were setting up to photograph, so I could be in the space without any people, and I could spend 3 hours there inside someone's home photographing. So that was really great. But I think I was trying to pull a connection like to my hometown up here, trying to figure out what kind of project I could go in with the purpose and create. And that was kind of the idea that we came up with.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. Then I had one more question about this piece. So you talked a little bit about it was a friend's grandma's studio. The student question was, they kind of talked about how dreamy the light is in the space, and sort of, I don't know, like that almost not underwater, but like just like very evocative light in the space. And that's something that I noticed in a lot of your work, is that like whether it's inside with flat light because it's an interior and it's a like an estate sale, or if it's like outside with crisp light or dreamy, like the light is always a really important aspect of your work, and it carries a lot of meaning too. And I just was curious about how that functions for you. Like, do you consciously think about the light, or is it more of like an unconscious part of your process?
I think I always think about the light because that's what I'm drawn to first, usually in a space, just noticing how warm it is or how it makes me feel in general. And then kind of look around um for objects that maybe speak, or have a story to tell, I guess, about the person. So this one, I can't remember if it was like a greenhouse on the other side, and maybe that's why it like has this really diffused, like blue green color to it. Um, but yeah,
Yeah,
I guess I'm
it's really
always,
beautiful and sad, a little bit sad.
I know, and I hadn't shown this one in a long time because I didn't know where it fit, and then for the show, I thought I'd put it up again. It needed a little field trip. It had been in storage too long.
Yeah, it
Um,
just has a very, feels like it connects to nostalgia and memory, and that idea of like not, and several student questions touch on this, the idea of not being able to go home, that when you go home, like things have changed, and
mhm.
places that you did connect to. So something that I find interesting is that even though a lot of these spaces aren't your home, you're still able to kind of plug into what elements suss that out, or like bring that feeling up for a person, this kind of longing feeling, towards something that you
Mm.
know is not, you're not able to connect to again. I'm gonna flip over. Let's see if I can stop my share to Flipgrid. Hopefully, we'll see. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. So, like I said, Dom collected some student um, questions. So I think I'm going to pull this one up. Can we see it okay?
Mhm.
Okay. So one of their questions, and in Flipgrid, they can do responses and they can include text and images. So they went into your show and took pictures of the pictures and then included those in their questions. Um, One of the questions, there's two that I wanted to kind of point out. Um, you talked a little bit about the drawer picture, but what inspires you to take a picture like that? Because to me, it's very formal as well, like very much about the composition, but sort of what grabs your attention that tells you that's a decisive moment?
Gosh, yeah, that one's tricky because again, that one I haven't shown too much because I never knew if it fit with the project. So I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about that image. But I only remember that was an early estate sale. That was probably in 2007. Um, Probably one of the first ones I did with this company. Would inspire me, gosh.
Well, I mean, and what I was going to even say, like, I feel like many of the pictures are also about the composition, that the composition with the drawer out and the pattern um, is really interesting and strong, and that just kind of, I was curious, as when you're exploring these spaces, do you just see compositions pop out at you?
Yeah, I mean definitely. I see compositions pop out, I see lighting, I see texture, I see pattern, um, in detail. Like all of those things kind of at once. And I feel like this one, it looked definitely like an old dresser that my grandmother had that wasn't painted white, that was brown with those big chunky doorknobs or knobs on it. And this was upstairs in a room and had windows on both sides. And I was maybe up there and couldn't find anything, like maybe how they had arranged stuff, maybe I couldn't find any good still lifes or images, and so I just started kind of opening drawers, I think, to see. And then that one had that pattern in it. And I was just thinking, oh, of course, yeah, okay, now this is a grandma's room, basically, right? And so then I left that open and I made an image that way. I'm trying to get up high so I could see the wallpaper or the contact paper, but then also, you know, getting close enough where I could see the details on the knobs. Yeah, this one definitely is like needs to be 30 by 30 just so you can see the details on it.
Inside the drawer. All right, I think there's another one in this group. Let me pull it down. I believe there's my little bars in the way. Yeah. So this person put together a video, and some of it is their reaction, where they talk about like this piece in particular connecting to the name of the show, because there's that empty space where the clock was, which I really liked. And they talk about, I think in their comments, a couple different pieces that this gives them like a kind of like the idea of moving out of a childhood home, and that soft untouched look to the piece we were just looking at. But what I thought was interesting were, let's see if I can pause it on this. Ooh, just gonna go down to it. There we go. So the questions they had were, you've already talked about really your ideas behind the work, but do you have a personal favorite from the show, like of the images that you took?
Well, I like the green lamp one a lot. I don't know, I just really love that one. And I think it's because of the object too, the lamp and the light coming through the lamp and the symmetry of the photograph. I mean, a lot of my photographs seem very symmetrical, where like the object is kind of in the center, and that's not on purpose. I feel like that just is kind of how I see stuff. But then they're not, you know, all like that either. But I feel like when I go through images to enter a show, I'm just like, these are all the same composition. They're all right in the center. But yeah, I think that the green lamp one, the grapefruit one, I think is one of my favorites because again, you know, just the details in there and kind of, you know, I remember not knowing that grapefruits didn't come cut because mom would always cut them and then I would just eat them. And then when I was trying to do it myself, I'm like, why is this not, you know, coming out on its own? And so like I have that connection, I think, with that, just kind of personal like jokes with a lot of these objects. Yeah, I think those two would probably be my favorites of the group.
Cool.
That I always come back to over and over again.
And then there was a question, and I'm just going to pull the piece up. So I had a student question about this piece as to whether this one actually isn't in the show, but it is in your book. And for anybody that joined a little bit late, I did put in the chat a link to Erika's website if you're curious. She also has artist books of 2 of her projects, including the one connected to the work that's in the show and a prior project. So you can, if you're interested, order an artist book from her website. But this is from the book, one of the books. And the student was curious as to whether you staged this or if you found it this way, and if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I found it this way. Like I said, I try not to set stuff up, and which was weird because like this is in my hometown. I was driving around trying to find some external pictures instead of like interior pictures. And so this was outside of Big Lots. It's on the far east side of town. And yeah, I just kind of pulled into the parking lot and was like, wait a minute. And then drove over there and was like, that's amazing. Why would they set them up like that? I don't know if it was intentional. So then I just stopped and you know, took a few images of it, different exposures, trying to get a good shot that way. But yeah, I don't know who set it up, but I love it.
Right on. That's awesome. So I'm going to open it up. If anybody has questions, you can unmute yourself and ask them, or throw them in the chat and I will read them.
And if you don't have any, that's fine too.
Anybody
This is
curious?
Allison.
Oh.
I have a question. I was wondering, if like when you started photographing, was there like any moment where you were like, oh, this is the thing I learned that like is kind of making everything kind of like click into place? Or were there like moments where you felt like you started doing something differently or like something changed for you and how you worked that were kind of like, oh, this is, you know, this is making a difference in my life. Like an example for me would be like when I learned how to like colorize line work in Photoshop with like a single like check mark. And I was like, oh, everything could be easy. I don't know. It's okay if you don't have an answer to that question. It's kind of deep, but
No, I like
just
that.
thought I'd throw it out there.
God, I feel like nothing with photography is easy. That's the problem. It's like, I feel like when I finally figured Photoshop out better,
Yeah.
that took forever. Um, and then I could like alter the pictures differently. Um, but man, or I think like when I learned to use the Hasselblad really well, like that was just like I could just do it real quick and load it and snap on the back, and yeah, that always felt
Can you
really.
tell the audience what a Hasselblad is? Because I didn't know until I met you. So,
I don't know if I have it laying around. It's a bigger medium format camera, and it takes, I have a back here. So there's a back that goes, there's a body and then a big lens on the front. And the film is this big. It's 2¼ by 2¼ inches. And it's like, an older picture or camera, you wind it, right? And you take a picture and then you wind it and you take a picture. So it has that like very manual feel to it, which I always really loved. And it has such a weight to the camera itself. But you have bigger films, so you can make bigger images or bigger prints. And so I was always kind of interested in that. But yeah, like I think too, well, I was telling Laura, I was making some images a few weeks ago and I like realized with my iPhone, which is like the only camera that I use now. And I was like, oh, if I use a mirror, then I can still use the front lens on it and not the selfie lens. And then that was like a big thing. That's like the dumbest thing. But just the fact that I like figured that out, and my boyfriend was like, wait, haven't you been doing that the whole time? And I'm like, no. Like if you figured it out, you should have told me weeks ago, because it took me forever. But yeah, I think technical things like that, like you were saying, Allison, like where you're just like, oh my God, this is okay. This is really gonna help.
Nice.
thank
Thank
you,
you.
Allison. All right, we got a question from Danny. How often do you take photographs, and what inspires or motivates you to take your camera and start shooting?
How often do I take them? Gosh, I take them a lot less now, which sucks. Honestly.
Well, just for context, you have a 4-year-old.
I have a 4-year-old,
So
and with the pandemic.
how, and like maybe just for the audience, like how often did you shoot pre baby slash toddler? And then I feel like you're shooting more now, just knowing you. So
Right. A little bit more now recently, which has been nice. Well, yeah, I mean, like college and grad school, that's all you're doing, right? And so I was photographing multiple times a week and processing film every week and looking at images and scanning images. And then, afterwards you get out of that rhythm. You have to get like more full-time work, which takes up your time. And so I think, gosh, I'm trying to think 4 years ago. Like when I did the last book, I was probably photographing, gosh, just a few times a month, if that. But then now it's like not a lot,
and you
unfortunately.
were shooting too when you did the Hutchinson project quite a bit. So
Right.
I feel like
So I
there's
think,
an ebb and a flow a little bit to the work.
yeah, for sure. Like if you have a project that you know and you focused on and you've made some images for it already and you're like, this is the direction I need to be going, you start booking like where you're going to go. And so I think, I mean, other photographers work differently than me, where they kind of photograph all the time, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I make a lot of images that don't fit anywhere. And so then later I have to figure out like where they go, or figure out connections between some, and then make more images based on that. So it's maybe not a super linear way to do it, but.
All right, we've got a question from Janet.
Oh.
If it was easier to get film processed, would you prefer that? Does it work better for some situations?
I think it depends on the project. Because I think the estate sale stuff, it was so still and so quiet that I could take long exposures with the film. A lot of those exposures were, seconds long because the space was darker. Digital, I feel like I can't get the exposure right with the longer stuff sometimes. The Hutchinson project, I did use digital, like I said, because that was like more of a quick turnaround. So I think if you have time to like live in the pictures or like live with the pictures for a long time, film is great. But I think it depends on the project too, because now I've been dealing with some personal stuff and trying to make more images of me. And so, the Hasselblad doesn't work for that because it's hard to make images of yourself with that the way I want to. And so that's why I've been using the phone more, because you can look right away and be like, out of focus, try it again, and kind of work
Less
that.
lag time.
Yeah, less lag time. A lot more images quickly. So
Cool. Does anybody else have questions? You can either jump in or throw it in the chat. I'm happy to read it for you. Okay. Looks like we may be coming to the end. Before we wrap up, I'm going to just quickly do a screen share of your website just to encourage people to go there. I really love this early series, Ghosts in Empty Classrooms. So if folks are so inclined, they can head over there and see some of your other projects. So they're all linked under projects. Changing Hands was the project focused more on estate sales.
And I don't think this has been updated in 4 years. So there's definitely other
so
stuff.
and there's additional images too that then people can get to look at. And then artist books for folks who are interested in, there's a link here. If you're interested in ordering a book, I have both of them. I highly recommend it. If you do go to the show as well, it is up until March 31st in James Wagner Gallery at Austin at River.
And I feel like that Amazon link doesn't work anymore on that book, just FYI.
Okay, so if people are interested, they should just contact you.
Just bug me. Yeah.
Awesome. So both of these books, if you do go to the show, they're available for you to peruse if you want to try before you buy. All right, I'm gonna pop out of there. Oh, we got one new message. Oh, thank you. Yay. Danny, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Folks, thanks for coming out tonight. I know it's some of your spring break, so I really appreciate the time. It was great to see Dale and Jan here as well, since they're in the show. So, yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erika, for joining us and talking about your work. And have a wonderful night, y'all. And this will be up on the Riverland website. So if you missed some of it, I'll send it to Erika and we can link it online. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.